Hello everyone, this is Garrett again. Kind of here to bring a little bit of explanation of what is port forwarding. Get a lot of questions and how do you test it, and hopefully I'll solve some of those questions here. Just explaining how it works and a little bit of how you can test it, just depending on what you're doing and how you're trying to port forward. Two items I'm going to be using today is a router and a computer. The icons are to the left of the naming, so hopefully this is pretty easy concept to follow, especially with these images. First off, what is port forwarding? Port forwarding is basically mapping a specific port. The port's going to be translating from outside to inside, so that means you have to allow it from the outside to come inside to be able to resolve. It's built on top of NATing, basically network area translation. This translation is basically making one IP become a funnel for multiple IPs. When it comes to port mapping or PAT, it's basically one IP or multiple IPs able to map one port to multiple computers or multiple networks or multiple ports. It just always depends on how you have it set up. In this one, we're basically doing a port forwarding. This is going to be one port, like port 80, to another port of port 80 inside our network. So I'll explain a little bit more on that in the next diagram. So this is a basic network. As you notice, I have an outside. We have the outside internet right here, which goes into our router. Our router then has a network of 192.168.0.1. /24 means mask. That's basically what subnet I'm going to be using. In this case, I'm using 255 IPs, which isn't fully exact because you're actually going to lose two IPs, one for broadcasting and then one for your basic gateway. That's gateway is going to be our router, which as you notice here, I have 192.168.0.1. Inside our network, we have a computer. This is basically a normal server computer. I'm going to kind of state this as, but I just use a generic computer icon. It has an IP of 192.168.0.10. The current ports that I would like to be able to access is ports 80, 3389, and 53. Port 80 is a basic HTTP or basic browsing of a website port. Next thing is 3389. This is for remote desktop. And port 53. Well, the port 53 is your basic resolve for whenever you type in google.com, it goes to an IP of 98. Whatever. It just depends on what IP is external. In this case, depending on what your DNS is set to, that's what's going to resolve from. So next up is trying to get these ports, port 80, 3389, and 53, accessible from the outside. So as you notice, we need these outside ports open, 80, 3389, 53. So first off, you would have to have a transition setup or NAT/PAT to be set up through your firewall or router or sonic wall, depending on what device you have. In my case, I have a D-Link. I'm not going to be showing you today, but you're going to basically open up these ports and point them to the IP of your computer or the server or whatever the device is. In this case, the ports 80, 3389, 53 will be going to the IP of 192.168.0.10 through our router. Then from our router, it's going to point actually to that IP. Once it so basically, in all explanation of this, they're going to type in the IP of 98. In this case, I used X, but just say 98.0.0.1. If they type that in, they're going to hit it. Through your web browser, you're going to hit this port. After you hit that port, this router right here, or device, is going to point to your computer. So it's going to actually call for the port 80 if I use this in a browser. If I use remote desktop and type in the same IP, it's going to try to forward this to this computer too. Same thing goes for DNS. Now the question is how do you test this if you do set it up? It's very easy, but it can be complicated depending on how your network is. Right now I'm showing a simple diagram. This diagram is just I have my outside, I have my router, and I have my computer. Where I have broken down here at the top here is going to be, like I said earlier, 80 website, 3389 remote desktop, 53 DNS. On the side, I just kind of said a side note. Main one that I worry about for most people is DNS, especially for those that are in a business or in a school and they're trying to port forward for resolve from the outside. If you're using Windows, you're going to probably use NSLOOKUP. There's the same type of tools or equivalent on all operating systems. You just need to know what the name is. NSLOOKUP is a great tool. It allows you to specify what server you want to use to try to resolve. And whenever you try to use this tool, I'm not going to go in deep details on that part, but just a basic testing of how you do this is you're going to first try to do all these equivalent on the same network. So you would attach another computer onto the 192.168.0.1. It could be IP of 10, 15, 20. Don't use 10 because 10's already used, as you can tell here. But you're going to set it on the same network. Once you set it on the same network, you're going to try to access it. So you're going to type in the IP of 192.168.0.10 into your browser. Do you get something back? After that, you're going to type in, you don't open up remote desktop, and you don't open up type in 192.168.0.10. Does it pull up remote desktop? Does it allow you to log in? This is just testing the inside of your network. Same thing for the DNS. You're going to go command prompt if you're using Windows, type in NSLOOKUP space dash, and I'll show that in a second for you. But this NSLOOKUP is pretty simple, but you're going to specify this IP. As long as you're inside this network, you're going to specify this IP that's right here. I can't really highlight. I'm not really using any specific tools in this case. But once you do that, if all those resolve correctly inside your network, now you have to go and test it on the outside of your network. How do you do that? Well, depending on how you are set up, you might have multiple IPs, you might only have one. If you only have one, then you're going to have to use a secondary device or somebody else's internet. There's many ways that you can do that. People have where you have servers that you can remote into and test all this. I don't know any off the top of my head, but that's another way to test it. So what you're going to have to do is now test the outside of your network. So that means go to, just say you get free Wi-Fi next door. It's from McDonald's or something. Just go there, type in the IP address of the outside of your router. Does it resolve? Then do the same thing for remote desktop. Do the same thing for DNS. If it resolves on the outside, that means you have port forwarding set up correctly, that it's going straight through and hitting the computer and coming straight back to you. Now, for those on a home network or home internet, like from Cox or Comcast, you don't have a business line, you might have a couple of these ports blocked. They don't like it when people falsify IPs or falsify addresses. A lot of things can happen. So they might have port 53 blocked, so you will never be able to do DNS. It's just how it's going to happen. You might have port 80 blocked. You can never host a local website. It just depends on what you're in. If you're a business, you shouldn't have any of that blocking. If you do, you might want to contact your service provider. Now, just kind of give another breakdown. This is a complicated network. This is kind of like a big business or a school network. Schools tend to have a breakdown of what network you're going to be part of, and it always becomes complicated. It becomes complicated because you want to port forward from the inside, same ports I was using before, 80, 33, 89, and 53, and you want to be able to make it to the outside. As you notice here, I have 1, 2, and 3 routers, each one on a different network. Now, their external IP I did not mark, but it's just the same basic testing as we did in the previous right here. So, what you're going to first have to do is open up the ports. You have to open up on this router. So, you're going to have this IP of whatever it is. It might be 192.168.5. I'm going to say 6. This router is 5.6 on this network. That means 5.6 is going to be what is used to port forward to this computer. Then you're going to have to do the next one. And this one's going to follow the same concept of 172.16.0.6. So that one needs a port forward to this IP right here on this device. So from this device that I'm on to the next router down the line. From that router, it's going to forward to the computer. Then finally, you're going to do the same thing for the third time. This is where it always becomes annoying because you have to slowly work your way through it, the network. And always remember, work from the bottom of the chain to the top of the chain. Top of the chain would be the outside. Bottom of the chain would be where the server or computer is located. And basically, again, we're going to go, okay, our external IP needs to forward to this IP of this router down the line. Then this router needs to forward to the IP of the router down the line again. And then from that router, it needs to forward to the computer. Now, that sounds like a lot of work. It's not. Basically, if they're all the same router, you pretty much set in the same command other than the IP is changing. Now, to test that, just following the same concept. Like I said, you work from the bottom of the chain to the top of the chain. So from the bottom of the chain, we're going to stay on the same network again. And we're going to try all our testing tools. So first, test on this network to try to get to this computer. Next, go into the 192.168.5 network and test and try to hit the IP of this router. Next, you're going to go up again. You're going to be on the 172.16.0.1 network. Once you're on that network, you're going to try the IP on this router. So you're in this network, so your IP would be 172.16.0.20. You're going to try to get to the IP of this router. So in this case, I'm going to say the router is 172.16.0.6. That means what you're going to type into your browser is 172.16.06. Yeah, it's very redundant here, but it's the best way to test. Especially if you just jump to the outside, you're not going to be able to test, because you're going to be like, it's not working, it's not working. And then you're going to go here and it says, oh, it's working, it's not working. It's going to be down the line, so it's always easier to work from the bottom. And then finally, you're going to do the thing for the third time. I know, so annoying. Third time, basically, like I said before, go to McDonald's. Since this is outside your network, go to McDonald's, go to your friend's house, go to some place that has a different internet connection, and just type in the external IP. Always remember, I didn't list that here, but always remember that you cannot use a private IP on the outside. Just the basic concept is always remember, test up the line. And just a little bit of a breakdown before I get done here with you guys. I just wanted to say this is NSLOOKUP. As you notice, I have it open in Windows. You just type in NSLOOKUP and it'll tell me what my default DNS server is. There's other commands for that. I don't have that on the screenshot, but just the basic of DNS. It's a domain name system wow, I can't even talk. Sorry about that, guys. To obtain domain name or an IP address mapping. It's basically resolving. So if I type in a domain google.com, it gives me the IP of 8.8.8.8, which is actually one of their DNS servers in this case. You actually get multiple IPs back. It's just going to find whatever's specific to you. If there's any questions, please leave a comment at the bottom. I'm here to help. I try to make tutorials pretty simple. If this is a little bit complicated, ask the questions. I'm here to help. Like I said before, here to help. Hope you guys have a good one. Hope this was helpful.